I was born in the hour of the dragon, yet my spirit always sought the silence of water. Perhaps you know me only through those rapid strikes on screens, splintering wooden boards, or the sharp battle cries I unleashed. But my true story began in dimly lit rooms no one ever saw, amid the storms deep within my mind and the healing, formless nature of water. Close your eyes and return with me to 1950s Hong Kong, to the humid, crowded streets of Kowloon. The air always carried the scent of freshly brewed tea and rain-soaked old asphalt. The neon glow of streetlights trembled in puddles like ghosts. In those years, I was only the little dragon, but there was a fire inside me that I could never extinguish. The streets were dangerous, and to survive, I joined the 8 Tigers gang. Even in my early teens, I knew our rivals, who wore white handkerchiefs on their collars, waited for us at every corner. I still remember the fear in the eyes of the large boy who cornered me between the cold, damp ceramic walls of a school one day. When I pulled the knife from my pocket and forced him to strip off his clothes, what I gained was not a victory, but merely a new shadow that would never stop following me. My father knew there was only one path left for me when the police began showing up at our door: leave. In 1958, with only $100 in my pocket and the endless hum of Hong Kong in my heart, I decided to cross an entire ocean. Can you feel, right now, the silence of those harbor lights fading away from the deck of that ship? But I haven't told you the most important part yet. When I arrived in America, Seattle's misty mornings greeted me. I was no longer a child star or a gang member. I was a man discovering philosophy, trying to fill that formless emptiness within his mind. Imagine the dim parking garage where I first established the Junfan Gung Fu Institute. The cold, unforgiving texture of concrete, the solid sound echoing through my hands with every punch. People came to me seeking secrets, but all I offered them was hard work and honest self-expression. I was stripping away, one by one, the rigid and impractical movements of classical arts, because to me, perfection was not about adding things, it was about removing what was unnecessary. One day in Oakland in 1964, they came to challenge me because I had defied tradition. According to the traditional masters, teaching non-Chinese students was a crime. What happened in that narrow room that day was told in many different ways throughout history, but only those who were there knew the truth. When the man facing me became frightened by my explosive power and started running around the room, I felt how breathless I became while chasing him. I had won the fight, pinned him to the ground, and shouted, "Do you surrender?" Yet in that moment, I confronted my own weakness. A 3-minute chase had exhausted me. That night, in the silvery silence of moonlight filtering into the room, I realized classical Wing Chun was limiting me. And thus, Jeet Kune Do was born from the ashes of that feeling of inadequacy. But the deepest secret of my spirit was hidden in that famous Long Beach demonstration. When I stepped onto the stage, the hall smelled of floor polish and heavy anticipation. Standing before me was a karate master who outweighed me by 50 kilograms. This silence is, in fact, like a peaceful cloak draped over Hong Kong's endless hum, gang fights, and the hard footsteps echoing through its streets. Close your eyes and come with me back to the streets of Kowloon in the 1950s, to that uneasy world where neon lights trembled in reflection upon the rain-soaked old asphalt. The air always carried the scent of freshly brewed strong tea mixed with the damp salt of the sea. Can you feel that scent filling your lungs right now? Back then, I was only Xiulong, the little dragon, and my spirit had to keep pace with the wild rhythm of the neighborhood. To survive, earn respect, and most importantly, hide my fear, I had joined the 8 Tigers gang. For us, the streets were not playgrounds, but battlefields whose borders changed at any moment. We recognized our rivals by the faded white handkerchief pinned to their collars. That handkerchief was the silent sign of a confrontation waiting around the next corner. I still remember. I was 13 years old. When that large bully who extorted protection money from younger students confronted me at school, only the echo of the cold ceramic walls filled the hallway. When I called him into the restroom, I was gripping the cold, smooth steel of the knife in my pocket. In the moment I slammed him against the wall, I wasn't just winning a fight. I was meeting that uncontrollable rage inside me for the first time. The reputation I earned by forcing the boy to strip off his clothes and throwing them into the street was actually a warning of the larger shadows that would soon follow me. But within this silence, I still haven't whispered to you about the true fear I left behind in Hong Kong's dark streets. One day, while playing billiards at Bai Han Rot, imagine the expression on the faces of the group that walked through the door and the sudden quickening of my heartbeat. An entire group was after me. As I blended into the crowd to escape them, I waved to people and used my growing fame to draw attention to myself, intimidating the gang members for a while. Yet, in that moment, I understood that fists and knives could only protect you so far. True power was hidden within the mind. When a kung fu master dropped me to the ground with a single move during a gang fight, my fiery pride cracked for the first time. That defeat led me to Grandmaster Ip Man, to his dim room scented with incense. Ip Man taught me not only how to fight, but how to stop. Yet I was impatient. Even while talking, I moved my arms and legs, always on guard as if an attack might come at any moment. He spoke of water, how water takes the shape of any container it enters, yet can eventually bore through even the hardest rock. Meanwhile, I continued to involve myself in the thefts and street fights of the 8 Tigers gang. When the police arrived at our door and became the final straw for my father, I found myself standing on the deck of a ship leaving the harbour on a misty morning in 1958. I had only $100 in my pocket and Hong Kong's endless fire within me. As the harbour lights slowly faded into the distance, imagine me touching the vast, dark and cold water of the ocean. In that moment, I felt that the little dragon of the streets had died and a formless spirit had been born. When I arrived in America, I began stripping away all the ornamental and wasted movements from my martial art, because the streets had taught me that efficiency, not aesthetics, saves lives. As Linda once said, energy is never destroyed, it only changes form. Perhaps as I transformed from that angry child in a neighborhood gang into a sage who whispered, "Be like water to the world," I never truly changed at all. I merely found my own nature. Now, within this silence, can you feel the calm yet unstoppable flow of water within yourself? Let your mind settle without clinging to any thought, as peaceful as the deep stillness at the bottom of the ocean. When morning comes, the world will tell a new legend. Perhaps about my 1-inch punch, or perhaps about my cries in the movies. But tonight, for you, there is only the healing silence of water and the weary memories the streets left behind. Everything flows, everything changes, and in the end, everything returns to its origin, to that infinite void. The cold breath of concrete is sometimes the starting point of the warmest dreams. Let your mind drift to those misty, rainy evenings in Seattle. While most people search for success beneath bright lights, I found it underground, in those dim corners where silence and discipline reigned. The room is still filled with the same sense of peace. The candle flame sways gently. Now come with me, back to that old parking garage in Seattle's First Hill district, among the cold, damp concrete where my dreams first began to take root. When I first established the Junfan Gung Fu Institute in Seattle in the early 1960s, this place was not a grand hall, but simply a parking garage. Can you imagine being there with me at that moment? The air carried the sharp, grey scent of old automobile tires, rusted metal, and rain-soaked concrete. In the shadows of the luxury cars around us, I trained with only a handful of loyal students. Every time our feet touched the cold ground, the solid sounds we made echoed off the empty walls of the garage. In those days, I had neither great wealth nor a famous name, only $100 in my pocket and the first sparks of the philosophy of being like water in my mind. The harsh and soulless atmosphere of that parking garage actually taught me movement in its purest form. There were no mirrors there, no fancy mats. Only me, my students, and a pale light filtering across the rough walls of the garage. Yet this limited space was not an obstacle to the expansion of my spirit. It was a stepping stone. As people walked past the garage, they had no idea that a revolution was beginning inside. Have you ever considered that the moments when you feel most restricted in life may actually be the doorway to your greatest freedom? But I haven't told you the most important part yet. When the cold walls of the parking garage began to feel too small for our dreams, we decided to move the school to the basement of a building in Chinatown. This transition was not only about changing locations, it was also a moment when my philosophy deepened. Imagine yourself descending those narrow stairs into the basement. The metallic scent of the parking garage was gone, replaced by the heavy yet comforting smell of old wood, faint incense, and aged brick. This basement was like a secret refuge, completely isolated from the world. While life rushed on noisily outside, we built our own world underground, guided by the rhythm of our punches striking the smooth yet solid surface of the wooden dummy. This was where the seeds of Jeet Kune Do were planted, where the wasted motions of classical arts were stripped away until only efficiency remained. I stepped beyond tradition and opened these doors to people of every race and age. At the time, this caused a great storm within the martial arts world. Can you hear those rhythmic sounds of the wooden posts in that basement now, within this silence? There, we learned not only how to fight, but how to confront our own weaknesses. Beneath the misty Chinatown streets of Seattle, we were not merely warriors, we were artists. So when the dim lights of that basement went out and the door was locked, how would the great secret left inside one day open the doors of Hollywood? By morning, the world would hear of a new legend, but that night, in the silence of the basement, what was the single question echoing through the darkness? The rusty chains of tradition sliced through the silence of my Oakland studio that night like a knife. Perhaps the greatest battles are not fought in crowded arenas, but behind closed doors, before only a few witnesses and one's own conscience. Now close your eyes and travel with me to Oakland in 1964, to that narrow, dimly lit training hall. The air carries only the sharp, weary scent of old wood and determination. As the wind strikes the windows outside, the silence inside is almost tangible. Can you imagine being there in that moment with Linda, my friend James Lee, and me? I still remember the hard expressions on the faces of that group of traditional martial artists from San Francisco, and the cold texture of the challenge letter they held in their hands. They had brought me an ultimatum. Either I would stop teaching non-Chinese students, or I would fight them. To them, ancient secrets belonged only to a particular race. But in my mind, the philosophy of being like water had already taken root, and water does not discriminate between one cup and another. When the fight began, the man facing me expected me to establish rules, to fight honorably as if it were a sporting contest. But I whispered only one sentence to him. You challenged me to a fight, and now you want rules. This is not a game. This is real life. At that moment, with my first move echoing across the polished floor of the hall, everything exploded at once. The master standing opposite me was stunned by the little dragon's unstoppable explosiveness, and incredible as it may sound, he began running around that cramped room trying to escape me. But I have not yet told the most important part. Imagine that famous master fleeing from me by exiting through one door of the room and entering through another, while I pursued him like a hunter. At the end of that 3-minute chase, when I brought him to the ground, I raised my fist and held it near his face. In Chinese, I asked the famous question, "Fukum fuk?" In other words, do you surrender? I was the winner that night, but when I stood up, what I felt was not merely victory, it was a profound sense of inadequacy. I had won the fight, but I was out of breath. In that moment, I realized that my conditioning and the Wing Chun techniques I had learned up to that day were limiting me. That night, as Oakland's cool, silvery moonlight streamed through the window, the foundations of Jeet Kune Do were born from that feeling of exhaustion. For the first time, within that silence, I discovered that perfection is not about adding more things, but about eliminating what is unnecessary. So what was the real truth echoing in my mind as my opponents left the studio that night, and I remained alone in the darkness? By morning, the world would be talking only about this secret fight in Oakland, but I would awaken as an entirely different man on the path of being like water.